To be betrothed is to be married, but to live separately. When he discovered that his wife was pregnant, and he knew that that child could in no way be his own, he assumed that she was guilty of adultery. What else could he assume? Even after she told him about the angel Gabriel coming to visit me and the glory of Most High overshadowing me, he didn't believe her. And how could he? What would you say to a 14-year-old girl who turned up pregnant at Sam Law's office when she said, "Oh no, I'm not sexually active. The glory of the Lord overshadowed me, and the one who's within me is to be called Most High"? It is an impossible story to believe that was put upon Joseph. And what Joseph knows is that her sin will be his shame. In that culture, because they are still betrothed, she's not to be pregnant. They know her family's guarding her from everyone else. Everyone in town will assume that this is his child. And as a righteous man, that's a technical term, a tzaddik, one who follows the guideline of Torah, he knows he really only has two choices. One is to protect himself. And the way Joseph would protect himself is to say, "That's not my child." To separate himself, to publicly disgrace her. But he knows that if he takes that course, both Mary and the baby are going to be stoned to death. The other option before him is to divorce her quietly. That is, not expose her to public shame and ridicule, but then everyone in town will assume that it is his sin. Everyone in town will assume he's the wrongdoer. And not only will that shame cover him, but he'll have to pay damages to her father, even though they're not going to marry, because she turned up pregnant. To divorce her quietly is to take her sin and her shame on himself. And Joseph knows that, and he makes a decision to take care of her. Not one fiance in 1,000, I'm willing to wager you, would have taken that road on themselves. But something deep in the heart of Joseph is akin to something deep in the heart of God. There is a love and a grace for this, his wife, that he wants to hold on to. Something in him that said, "I'm not going to respond to my instinct that says, if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you." Something in me that says, I want you to feel pain in equal measure to my pain. There is something about what Joseph understands to be the heart of God that rules the day here for him. And he makes a decision to take her sin and her shame on himself. His son learned that lesson well. He makes a decision to act from love and grace rather than law and retribution. And his faith in who God is and what God calls us to be determined not only what he believed, but how he behaved. Does my faith determine what I believe and how I behave? And am I willing to be used by God? You know, the big test of our faith is less what it is that we believe about God, and more what are we willing to allow God to do through us. I don't take it to be a throwaway line there in the middle of the text, "and after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him." It wasn't that on that same night that the angel appeared to Mary and said, "Here's the invitation," and Mary said, "I am the Lord's handmaiden, may it be unto me even as you've spoken it," that he showed up with Joseph and said, "Hey, I've got great news." It's much later in the process. And it was after that Joseph discovered that his wife was pregnant. It was after Joseph made a decision about how he was going to respond that the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph. I think what that says is God gave Joseph an opportunity to be his own man, to make his own plan, to set his own path. And make no mistake about it, it is a path filled with faith and grace. And the plan of God is more faith-filled and more grace-offering than the one Joseph came up with. And so an angelic visit followed. In the depth of the night, in the midst of his dreams, an angel of the Lord came to Joseph in a dream and said, "Do not be afraid to marry Mary. This story she told you, that's gospel truth. This baby that is in her is the God-man, the Savior, the one who's going to change the whole world. God conceived in her a child just as surely as God made everything out of nothing, and you are to give him the name Jesus, Joshua, the Savior, because he's going to save his people from their sins. Now, the problem with the thing is the angel didn't go around to every other house in town. No one else got the message. It's Joseph alone who's bearing this story. The rest of the town's not privy to the revelation. So for the rest of the town, Mary's still in her sin. For the rest of the town, the marriage is still a scandal. And you know, they talked. It was a small town. Our friends Andy and Shauna Pittman, Andy's the pastor at First Baptist in Lufkin, Texas, up 59 from us now. When we both lived in Mississippi, we were at Highland Colony Baptist in Madison. They were 10 miles due north at First Baptist Church in Canton, Mississippi, when they got the great news that they were pregnant with their third child, who is now Joellen. They had a conversation in their family about, when are we going to tell people this good news? Shrewd couples know it's wiser to wait about 3 months because things can go wrong in a pregnancy. But it was their third pregnancy, and he's the pastor of the church, and they thought maybe it's time to just go ahead and announce the good news. The form of their conversation really was, do we fill our prescription for prenatal vitamins here in Canton? Or do we drive down the road to Jackson, which is a more anonymous place, HIPAA laws aside? Well, they made their decision. Without picking up a phone, without telling a neighbor, they dropped off the prescription at the pharmacy in Canton, and 20 minutes later, the phone started ringing. We heard the great news. People talk. And those folks in Nazareth can count months just like folks every place else in the world can count months. My grandfather says gestation is a funny thing. Second and subsequent children always take 9 months. First children can come anytime. And Joseph knew that the time between the wedding and the delivery wasn't going to match the number of months that it's supposed to take, and so this isn't going to be right for Mary. And so Joseph used the census as an opportunity to move his wife, who was by then great with child, to Bethlehem, where people hadn't been counting. Joseph came to understand that following God's plan for his life, being used by God, meant a total reorientation of his plan for life. He had a trade that he could ply anywhere, and it was time to take it somewhere that was not here. He understood that to be obedient to the call of God meant to be faithful even when that cost me, and cost me significantly, and requires that I dream a new dream for my life. But he was willing to be used by God, and so he moved. Just as surely as Mary said to the angel Gabriel, I am the Lord's handmaiden, may it be unto me even as you have spoken it. Just as surely as that was an utter and absolute yes to God, make no mistake.